Okay, so we're going to cover chapter 14, worksheet on page 413. Okay. Okay, so before we do any of the actual like parts of this question, I want everyone to read the label, and specifically the label for reconstitution instructions, because this entire chapter is focusing on the reconstitution of medication. So in the label on the left-hand side, it specifically says right here in fine text, the directions for mixing. So the directions for mixing tell us to add 90 milliliters. So our volume is 90 milliliters of water. So our solvent is water, in 2 portions to the dry mixture in each bottle. Shake well after each addition. Each 5 milliliters will then contain 125 milligrams of anhydrous sulfur. So that's telling us a dosage strength of 125 milligrams per 5 milliliter. Okay, and then at the top of the label on the bottle, right, we can see our total amount or the total volume that's available. So total available is 150 milliliters of medication once the vial has been reconstituted. Okay. So now let's look at the questions that we're being asked. Okay, so your patient has had a craniotomy and is prescribed C-chlor suspension 250 milligrams PO 4 times a day. Okay, so the order is 250 milligrams. We are still doing the same thing. Doctor's order multiplied by dosage strength. So the dosage strength is 125 milligrams per 1 milliliter. My units cancel, and I'm just going to take 250 divided by...
I thought it was 5 ml.
Oh, yes, you're right. Thank you, dear. Per 5. Okay, so 250 times 5 divided by 125. And that's going to give us 10 milliliters. Okay, so let's start answering all of the questions that they are asking us. So your patient has had a craniotomy, has C-chlor suspension 250 milligrams PO 4 times a day ordered. What should be used as the diluent? So what did you add to reconstitute the medication? You added water, right? So the diluent is water. How many milliliters of diluent should be added? We read the instructions and we know 90 milliliters of water should be added. How many milligrams are in the bottle? Okay, so we haven't calculated that. So I take the total available amount of medication in my bottle after I've reconstituted the medication. So my 150 milliliters, and I'm going to multiply that still by the dosage strength, except I want to cancel my milliliters now, right? So I'm going to do 125 milligrams per 5 milliliters, and that's going to give me 150 times 125 divided by 5 is going to give me 3750. My unit is milligrams. Okay, so how many milligrams are in the bottle? So I take my total volume of the bottle once it's reconstituted times my dosage strength. My units of milliliters are going to cancel, and I'm left with units of milligrams. So milligrams are in the bottle. I have 3750 milligrams available in the bottle. How many milliliters will you administer each dose? Okay, well, I already calculated that. I'm going to administer 10 milliliters each dose to my patient. This is what we've been doing, right, in all of our previous chapters. Okay, so then it asks us how many doses are available in the bottle. So again, we take the total amount that's available in the bottle. That's 150 milliliters. Now I know what my dosage for my patient is. So I take my total available and I divide it by my dose administered. So 150 divided by 10 is going to give me 15 doses available. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, because it's a lot of little parts, but everything is there as long as we're keeping track of it, okay? Okie dokie. Number 2. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so before we even get into all of this, let's read the label. Hold on. Okay, so directions for mixing. Add 35 milliliters of water. So what am I adding? The volume of diluent is 35 milliliters. The diluent is water.
It says 36.
I'm sorry, dear. You are more awake than me. Okay, good job. Okay, 36 milliliters of water in 2 portions to the dry mixture in the bottle. Shake well after each portion. And then right underneath that, the next sentence tells you each 5 milliliters will then contain cephalexin monohydrate equivalent to 125 milligrams. So that's the same as the big dosage strength information in the front and center of the label, right? So that's where we could find that information as well. Okay, so then what is the total volume available in the bottle after reconstitution? It's right here above the trade name. So we know our total volume available after reconstitution is 60 milliliters. Okay. And they're going to ask us for how many milligrams are available in the bottle. So we know we can take our total volume and multiply it by our dosage strength. Okay, and the dosage strength is 125 milligrams per 5 milliliter. So I'm going to take my total volume, 60 milliliters. I'm going to multiply it by my dosage strength, so I cancel the milliliters. That's going to give me 60 times 125 divided by 5. It's going to give me 1,500 milligrams. Okay, then I'm going to calculate my dose administered to my patient based on the doctor's order. So the doctor's order is 275 milligrams. My dosage strength, it doesn't change. So it's still 125 milligrams per 5 milliliters. My units of milligrams are going to cancel. And I'm going to take 275 times 5 and divide by 125. And that's going to give me 11 milliliters. Okay. And then I know I have 60 milliliters available as my total volume once my medication is reconstituted. And I now know that I'm administering 11 milliliters per dose to my patient. So I'm going to take 60 divided by 11, and that's going to give me 5.45 doses. So I round this down. Okay, so this is going to give me 5 complete doses that I could administer to my patient using what's available in the bottle, right? Because I wouldn't administer a half or a portion of the dosage amount to my patient. Okay, so let's go through the questions. Okay, so what should be used as the diluent? Water. How many milliliters of diluent should be added? 36 milliliters. How many milligrams are in the bottle? 1,500 milligrams are available in the bottle. Okay, how many milliliters will the nurse administer per dose? The nurse will administer 11 milliliters per dose. And how many doses are in the bottle? There are exactly 5.45 doses, but we focus more on the complete doses. So there's 5 doses available, 5 full doses available in the bottle. Okay? So let's do number 3. Okay, number 3. I gotta flip my book around just to read it as well. Okay, directions for mixing. Add 62, so the diluent volume is 62 milliliters of water. So the diluent is water. In 2 portions to the dry mixture in the bottle. Shake well after each addition. Okay, what is the total volume available in the bottle?
Miss Roxy.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where are you finding the volume?
The volume?
Mm-hmm.
Right here. Like, you see where my cursor is at?
Mm-hmm.
So if you read that sentence, it says add 62 milliliters of water.
Hold on.
Yeah, so this is why I tell you guys, invest in one of those tiny little.
Okay, I see. Let me highlight that.
Yeah, because this chapter is the annoying chapter, in my opinion, just because the font is so tiny in y'all's textbook too, and it's not something we're used to doing. It's not something that's a habit. Like, you don't normally read Reconstitution information when you go to Walmart and buy a medication. You just know, right? Like, the label tells you what to take. But as a nurse, you have to go through this process and reconstitute the medications. So it's going to have always specific mixing instructions. It's going to tell you exactly what volume of diluent to use. So in this case, it's the 62 milliliters, and it's going to tell you exactly which diluent to use. And so for this example, it's water.
Okay, and where are you finding the total available?
And then the total available, it's the same thing we've been doing on our labels, right? So when we look at total available, it's typically gonna have this volume when mixed.
Okay, got it.
They're already telling you, right? They're giving you some clue words. They're telling you when it's mixed, when you've reconstituted this medication, then you will have available 100 milliliters of medication available to administer to your patient, right?
Yes, that's when it's mixed already.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, and then we know our dosage strength for C-chlor is going to be 375 milligrams per 5 milliliters. Okay, so first let's figure out how much medication is available in the bottle. So we take our total available volume, which is 100 milliliters. We multiply it by our dosage strength. And we're going to get 100 times 375 divided by 5. I think this is the one that has an error in the back of the book, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so available is 7,500 milligrams of medication. Okay, so now we look at the doctor's order, what we've been doing thus far. So the doctor's order is 600 milligrams, and we still use the dosage strength. So 375 milligrams per 5 milliliters. We cancel our units of milligrams. And we're going to take 600 times 5 divided by 375, and that's going to give us 8 milliliters. Okay, so then we know our total available volume is 100 milliliters. We're administering 8 milliliters to our patient per dose. So we're going to take 100 divided by 100 divided by 8, and that's going to give us 12.5 doses, or 12 full doses. Because again, here we round down because we can administer 12 complete doses. We're not going to administer a half a dose to our patient.
Okay, where's the 8 milliliters coming from?
Right here, dear. Right, so this is what we've been doing.
Oh, okay, I see. Got it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. I know it's a lot of little pieces just to keep track of. In this chapter, it's baby steps.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so then for this chapter, when they're asking you on the test, what should be used as the diluent? The diluent is water. How many milliliters of diluent should be added? 62 milliliters. How many milligrams are in the bottle? 7,500 milligrams are available in the bottle. How many milliliters will the nurse administer per dose? The nurse will administer 8 milliliters per dose. How many doses are available in the bottle? You take your total available, you divide it by your dose amount, you have 12 full doses available in the bottle. Cool?
Got it.
Okay, number 4. Sorry guys, I'm just like really congested today. Okay. So Okay, so number 4, it's a little bit different, but we're still going to go through our steps, okay? So the volume of diluent and the diluent added. Okay, so reading the instructions, the sterile solution may be kept in refrigerator for 7 days without significant loss of potency. Okay, so usual adult dose intramuscularly 400,000 units 4 times a day, intravenously 10 million units a day. See literature. Contains sodium citrate citric acid buffer. Okay, so for this medication, does it give us the mixing instructions? Do I know exactly what my volume of diluent and my diluent is?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, good. So they're asking us, right? So it doesn't give us this information. It's not readily obvious in a sentence like they've given us in 1, 2, and 3, right? So it's going to take us a little bit more work on this one, just in reading carefully. So what is the doctor's order for this patient? The doctor is prescribing 500,000 units, right? So on this medication, I have a scale on the left-hand side of my label. If I add a diluent in the amount of 9.6 milliliters, I get a dosage strength that results in 100,000 units per milliliter. If I add 4.6 milliliters of diluent, I get a resultant dosage strength of 200,000 units per milliliter. If I add 1.6 milliliters of diluent, I get a resultant dosage strength of 500,000 units per milliliter. So which of those concentrations of solution am I going to choose for this doctor's order?
1.6.
Right? Okay, so 1.6 milliliters is the volume of diluent. Okay, so when I use a diluent factor of 1.6 milliliters, what is my dosage strength that I get? The dosage strength that I get is 500,000 units per 1 milliliter, right? Because that's what our units tell us underneath the concentration of solution. So circle number 4, because what I don't want to see you guys do, and where students often make a mistake, is they take the 500,000 units per 1 milliliter, but then they want to put this 1.6 milliliters here. Don't do that. That's not what they're asking you. They're specifically telling you you added a volume of your diluent in the amount of 1.6 milliliters. And then you got a concentration or dosage strength, the concentration of solution. The resultant concentration is 500,000 units per 1 milliliter. And so we finished just calculating the way we normally would. We cancel all those trailing zeros. And you're going to administer 1 milliliter of this medication to your patient based on adding a volume of diluent of 1.6 milliliters. Okay? Okay, so then going back to answering the different question parts. So how much diluent should be added? you should add 1.6 milliliters. What is the medication concentration when you add 1.6 milliliters? It's the 500,000 units per 1 milliliter. How many milliliters will you administer? I'm going to administer 1 milliliter. And what would you circle on the label to indicate concentration? So on this medication, you would circle the line where it says 1 milliliter equals 1 milliliter of diluent added gives you a 500,000 units per milliliter concentration. You would circle that line. Because that's you telling, right? Because this doesn't say this is a single use vial. So what that is indicating is when you change shifts with the next nurse, you're telling her, him or her, I already added the 1.6 milliliters of the diluent. So in this vial of medication, the dosage strength available is 500,000 units per milliliter. So that the next time the next nurse has to administer this patient, she knows what appropriate dosage strength she has to still administer the medication to your patient properly, right? If you don't circle this after you've reconstituted the medication, she's not going to know what's in that vial. So we would have to just throw it away. Because otherwise we would risk either overdosing or underdosing our patient. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so 5. Let's look at what the doctor's order is. So the patient has a thoracotomy, receives penicillin, 600,000 units. How much diluent should be added? What is the concentration? So same thing. So which of these diluent volumes would you pick and what concentration or dosage strength would that result in? Okay, so if I picked either the 4.6 milliliters of diluent, that would give me a dosage strength of 200,000 units per milliliter. Or if I pick the 1.6 milliliters of diluent added, that would give me a resultant 500,000 units dosage strength. So I'm going to calculate both of those. So at 4.6 milliliters diluent, I get a dosage strength of 200,000 units per milliliter. So my units are going to cancel, and I'm going to cancel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 6 divided by 2 is 3 milliliters at this volume of diluent added. Okay, so I'm going to compare that to the same order, but using a different diluent factor at 1.6 milliliters diluent gives me a dosage strength of 500,000 units per 1 milliliter. Right, so you're left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to take 6 divided by 5, and that's going to give me 1.2 milliliters. 1.2 milliliters. So, where are we at? Yeah. Okay, so the diluent that we're going to select is the 1.6 milliliters of diluent, because that's the one that gives me a smaller volume of medication to administer to my patient. So if I choose the 4.6 milliliters of diluent, I'm going to administer 3 milliliters to my patient. If I choose the 1.6 milliliters of diluent, then I end up administering 1.2 milliliters of medication to my patient. And so typically we want to ensure that our patient receives a smaller volume. So we would choose the 1.6 milliliters of diluent to add to our medication to reconstitute it. We'll in turn have a 500,000 units per milliliter dosage strength. And when I calculate based on the doctor's order, I'm going to administer 1.2 milliliters of medication. Does that make sense to everyone?
So we always choose the smaller diluent for the patient.
Not necessarily. We want to pick what is going to give us the smallest volume.
Okay.
Okay, we want to pick the smallest volume of dose administered. So when we have these options, sometimes you're going to need to compare, right? So I just wanted to give you guys an example. Okay, so now let's move on to number 6.
So number 5 was 1.6?
So yes, we would choose to
Okay.
add 1.6 milliliters of diluent. And so, okay, let's go through the various parts of the question. So how much diluent should be added? We should add 1.6 milliliters of diluent. What is the medication concentration? When I add 1.6 milliliters of diluent, my concentration is 500,000 units per milliliter. How many milliliters will you administer? I'm going to administer 1.2 milliliters per dose. And what is the best choice for the amount of dilution and why? The amount of dilution, the best choice is the 1.6 milliliters diluent, because we would administer a smaller volume of medication to the patient. Does that make sense, dear? Okay. I'm gonna do this side. Okay, number 6. Miss Rose has Pfizer 250,000 units. I am ordered. How many milliliters will the nurse administer if 8.2 milliliters of diluent is added? So they're already telling us right here, we want to add 8.2 milliliters of our diluent. So we go over here to our table and it outlines it in this chart. When I add 8.2 milliliters of diluent, what is the dosage strength? Anybody?
250,000.
Are you sure?
8.2, 500,000.
Right? Okay, so see how easy it is to just jump into numbers
Mm-hmm.
on these tables? So again, circle number 4, number 5, and number 6. That way you can give yourself like extra practice, right? So this problem, they're already specifically telling me add 8.2 milliliters of the diluent So I go to my chart, I find the 8.2 milliliters of diluent, and then I go across so that I can find my dosage strength. So my dosage strength, when I add 8.2 milliliters of diluent, is 500,000 units per 1 milliliter. Because again, looking at the top of the chart, it tells us units per milliliter. So per 1 milliliter. We're not taking the 500,000 units per 8.2 milliliters. That would be incorrect. Don't do that. Don't mix up those two pieces of information. Okay, so then we just finish solving like we do. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 25 divided by 50 is 0.5 milliliters. So we would administer to our patient 0.5 milliliters of medication. And again, on this problem, you would come over to your syringe, draw your vertical line at 0.5 milliliters, and then shade it in back towards the needle. Okay? Number 7. The question is, how many milliliters will the nurse administer if 18.2 milliliters of diluent is added? So the order prescribed is 175,000 units. This time they're telling us to use the 18.2 milliliters of diluent added, and that results in a concentration or a dosage strength of 250,000 units per 1 milliliter. So we're going to cancel 3 zeros, get rid of our units, and we're left with 175 divided by 250. And that's going to give you 0.7 milliliters. And nothing to shade in on this one. Okay, number 8. Lorabid 500 milligrams oral every 12 hours has been ordered for a patient with pneumonia. How much diluent will be added to the bottle? What is the concentration after reconstitution, and how many milliliters will the nurse administer? Okay, so they're telling us the patient's order is 500 milligrams. Okay, now we already know the dosage strength because it's right here on the label. It's 200 milligrams per 5 milliliters. So cancel our zeros. 5 times 5 is going to give us 25. And then we're going to do divide by 2. That's going to give us 12.5 milliliters. Okay? And then we need to read our label, and it has right here, you can see my cursor. It's the directions for mixing. So the directions for mixing: add 60 milliliters of water in 2 portions to the mixture in the bottle. Okay, so how much diluent will be added to the bottle? We're adding 60 milliliters. What is the concentration after reconstitution? Well, it already is telling us on the label in the big bright dosage strength. So 200 milligrams per 5 milliliters is the dosage strength or the concentration after reconstitution. And then how many milliliters will the nurse administer? And we've already done our calculation, so we know that nurse is going to administer 12.5 milliliters. Okay, number 9. This a little bit. Okay. The licensed prescriber orders oxacillin 250 milligrams every 6 hours for a patient with a skin infection. How much diluent will be added to the bottle? What is the concentration after reconstitution? And how many milliliters will the nurse administer? Okay, so again, looking at the label. So right here, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it on this. Okay, so right here, does everyone see where my cursor's at? This
Yes.
problem is telling us to add 2.7 milliliters of sterile water. So the diluent is 2.7 milliliters sterile water. All of our previous examples have just said water. They weren't specifying sterile water. So when it does specify that, you also need to identify that information. It's 2.7 milliliters of sterile water. Okay, and then right after that, it tells you on the label each 1.5 milliliters contains 250 milligrams of oxacillin. So 250 milligrams per 1.5 milliliters. That's our dosage strength. Okay, and the doctor's order for this patient is 250 milligrams times our dosage strength. We're canceling our units. Milligrams cancel. 25 divided by 25 is 1 times 1.5. So we're going to administer 1.5 milliliters to our patient. So, or you can do that in your calculator and take 25 times 1.5 and then divide by 25. So you're still left with just the 1.5. Okay, and let's see, number 10. Okay, number 10. Let's find the mixing instructions. Okay, so right here, the solution should be refrigerated and used within 2 weeks. Mix the contents of this vial with distilled or deionized water, 20 milliliters. So our diluent that we're adding is 20 milliliters of either distilled or deionized water. Mix thoroughly to dissolve. When reconstituted with 20 milliliters, right? That's how much volume of diluent we're using. Each 5 milliliters contains approximately 250 milligrams of vancomycin, whatever. Okay, so my doctor's order is 500 milligrams. My dosage strength after my medication has been reconstituted is 250 milligrams per 5 milliliters. So I'm going to take 500 times 5 divided by 250. And that's going to give me 10 milliliters. All right. right, guys, that's all of the worksheet from chapter 14.